Hello fellow humans and welcome to this review of how to make reviews, and I'm going to use the Vickers CR as an example for this one because it is a great one for that. Now, obviously I do see comments here and there that say, yeah, why do you review every tank so negatively? So I want to go a bit into why I review tanks the way I do and how I do it. Now, obviously, what you start off with is the stats of the vehicle, you know, just to get the raw values out there because, I mean, you can look them up yourself and the other always should. Because that way you can also get yourself a better picture about the vehicles and you'd have to rely less on outside reviews. Stats themselves are a nice value to know. They're very interesting and very important. However, the problem with them is that they only make sense in the complete package. If a tank, for example, has amazing DPM but horrible penetration, then the DPM itself being high doesn't make it a good tank. It doesn't bring any value to the vehicle because it's being cancelled out by a downside that the vehicle does have. So, the better the package of the whole vehicle, the better the vehicle. Obviously, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and also check out the links in the description. And if you don't like it, don't dislike. Now, what I'm going to do first is go into a bit about more general things about the game that are important, and then in the second part, in the second game, I'll be going into how I specifically do review tanks and stuff like that. Now, the first important thing is that the margins that we're in here isn't really that big. It's obviously not like going from 20% performance to 80%. They're very small, and we go to somewhere between 45% average win rate to about 55 with all the tanks. Now, obviously, I do try to review tanks for the average viewer, because the average viewer is the most likely viewer. If I review tanks for unicums, that doesn't make sense. And if you're a unicum, you probably already know how to play the tank anyway, and if you don't, why the hell are you a unicum? But yeah, the thing is, what is important for Blitz is the package of the vehicle and how easy it is to play. Because if a tank like the Vickers CR, for example, which is very, very good, it is also very, very hard to play. So while this thing, the package of the vehicle, is great, the package of the vehicle also doesn't allow a regular player or average player to actually extract maximum performance from that package. And also, I can't drive. But that's not the thing here. Now, obviously, if you review for a unicum, that's dumb, because that's 0.01% of players, pretty much, and you already know how to play anyway. So, you gotta know, you, the average viewer, whether the tank's worth it for you. Whether the tank is gonna perform well for you. That's gonna be important, right? Now, obviously, one thing I have to say here is personal bias and stuff like that are gonna happen. For me, for example, I try to avoid reviewing very slow vehicles. I try to avoid reviewing turretless tanksters. I just don't like them. And when I make a video on them, I'm like, ugh, why the hell do I have to do this? I just rather not. So most of the time, I just don't, because I don't like them. So, and obviously, if I do make a video like that, I'll obviously already go into the video with like, why do I have to do this? I want to play a good tank. And then it's not gonna be as objective as it ideally should be, because it should be as objective as possible. It doesn't matter for you whether I like the tank or not. It shouldn't matter to you. Whether I like the tank or not doesn't fundamentally matter. It matters whether the tank performs well or not, right? And for example, personal bias is another thing. If I review a light tank and you know that you don't like light tanks, and then I recommend the light tank, then you should ideally know that you shouldn't follow that recommendation because you know that you don't like light tanks, for example. So, that is another very important thing there. Now, the game is very complicated. There are a lot of things involved. There are a lot of maps. There are a lot of tanks. There are a lot of different playstyles. All of those things. And obviously, the more you know, the better of a player you could be. This game is essentially a strategy game with a shooting element. And if you know more about the maps, about the vehicles, then you are going to do better. For example, if you know the VK's turn speed, then you know that you can circle him, for example. And if you also know that in water, turn speed is reduced, you can circle him even better. Or if you're that 183 and you don't know how to aim, you're going to die. So, it is very, very important to understand the basics of the game, ideally, because then also you have to rely a lot less on like outside reviews to spoon feed you everything and tell you exactly what a tank is. Ideally, you're gonna think yourself and also somewhat understand why it works and how it works, because that's very important. Like, again, the Vickers CR, great performance, but it does require a very strong player. Now, why is that? Put it in the comments. Pause the video right now. Put it in the comments. Why is the Vickers CR a great tank? However, it should only be played by good players. What do you think? Put it in the comments and then continue. But before we continue, a word from our sponsor, No One. Now, if you've answered because it doesn't have armor, then you've won. Now, the thing about armor is, the more of it you have, the safer you are. And the more armor you have, the more hit points you tend to have, right? So, a tank that is more well-armored tends to be easier to play and more noob-friendly because if you get shot, that's bad. But if you have a lot of armor, you're less likely to actually take damage from it and suffer from it. And obviously, the worse of a player you are, the less knowledge you have, the less you'll know about when to peek, where to peek, all those kind of things. And if you're playing a Vickers Light, it has amazing top-end performance, but you'll need to know how to extract that performance out of the vehicle to actually get it. Because if you don't know how to extract it, and you do make a lot of mistakes in the game, then it's going to backfire on you and be very bad, because obviously you have no protection against the mistakes that you're going to make, and boom, you're gone. And that's why I would never recommend any tank above that is like not that great and not well-rounded, because that's the point. Most of you aren't going to buy a lot of premium tanks. You're going to be like 4 or 5 premiums, maybe a maximum of 10. I currently own 55 tier 8s. How many of those would I recommend? Well, 6, 7, maybe? And that's the point. Because, first of all, a tank has to be relatively easy to play, so that you're going to enjoy it. Obviously, if you're a Unicum or whatever, then you already know your playstyle. You already know what you want from the game anyway. And that's why I always be like, I don't recommend a tank, but if you're a good player, you can make it work, basically. That's what I do say quite a lot of times. And that especially applies to tanks that don't have a lot of armor. Now, what you ideally want, and the tanks that I do recommend, is a tank that is versatile, a tank that is relatively easy to play, a tank that is easy to have fun in as well, because obviously, if the tank's not fun, then, yeah, like, I wouldn't consider driving around at 20 kilometers an hour to be fun, you know, and just watching a team die while you're just slowly trundling towards them. But obviously, some of you are going to enjoy it. So, there is that. But most of you won't. That's the point. I only recommend a tank if I'm sure that 80 to 90% that get it are going to enjoy it, are going to get value from it, and are going to have a good time with it. Otherwise, I might as well just recommend any tank and let you figure it out on your own. You're watching a video to find out whether a tank is really worth it or not. And not a lot of vehicles actually really are. So, this game has about 500 tanks in it, 500 plus tanks. How many of those are truly great and amazing? There's going to be about 20, 25, something like that. And then how many are good? Well, you get another 100, 120, something like that. And then you have a lot of average vehicles, and then you end up at the WZ5A kind of end. So, with that in mind, you also have to factor in the price of premium tanks. If, for example, a T-5042, which is a great, well-rounded, amazing vehicle, it's in the shop right now. If you want to have the best tier 8 premium you can get, that is well-rounded, that makes you creds, T-5042, right now. But if it were sold for like 15k gold, I still wouldn't recommend it because it were a bad price. If a vehicle is in crates, I will never recommend it because crates are designed to upsell you shit that you don't want. So, a crate tank is never going to be worth it, and any crate tank video is always going to end at the same, as in, the tank is whatever, but don't buy it because it's crates. So, that's another thing. There are a lot of things that need to align for me to actually properly recommend the vehicle, because if I recommend a tank, I want to be sure that if you actually follow that recommendation, that it's going to be a valuable recommendation to you, rather than just whatever. That's the point, right? If I recommend a tank, I don't want you to follow that recommendation and then regret it. I do try, but it's obviously impossible to please everyone, so some people are always going to be unhappy, and that's just how life is. You can't make everyone happy. If you try to do that, it's not going to work. And the thing is, for premium tank reviews, all those things have to be aligning. For tech tree tanks, however, that's not the case. Now, obviously, for tech trees, you want to have a good line, first of all. If I review a tier 8 and the tier 10 is horrible, then that negatively reflects on the tier 8 as well. The tier 8 would have to be really amazing to make up for the fact that if you continue the line, you're going to get disappointed. So all those things do factor in as well, but for tech tree tanks, it's a lot easier. They still have to like be good to play and stuff like that as well, but it is a lot easier on those. Now, obviously, you want to see which premium tanks are great and which ones are definitely worth buying, then I made a video about that a year ago. However, I will make a new one. Don't think much changed about that old video, but I'm still going to make a new one, so stay tuned to the channel if you want to see that. Why would you buy a T95 E2 ever when you can get a T4 E2, which is going to perform better, which is going to be better price to performance, and which you're going to enjoy more, and which is also easy to play as well. Obviously, at one point, you're going to be advanced, you're going to be interested in more things. You then might go for the more funky tanks, but obviously, I try to recommend for as broadly as possible, so I'll leave out those outliers, and and I also don't recommend bad tanks. That's obvious, so I don't recommend bad tanks. I don't recommend badly priced tanks, and I don't recommend tanks that are, well, not suitable for everyone, and then you pretty much go to a relatively narrow list, and that's why you don't see recommending a lot of tanks. But if you do get value from this channel, if you do get value out of this video, really appreciate it. Thank you very much for your support. Special thanks to obviously all the channel members. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Goodbye.